The earliest recorded European mention of America is in a treatise by the medieval chronicler Adam of Bremen, circa 1075, where it is referred to as Vinland. It is also extensively referred to in the Norse Vinland sagas. The strongest archaeological evidence of the existence of Norse settlements in America is located in Canada. There is significant scholarly debate as to whether Norse explorers also made landfall in New England. Early settlements: the Mayflower in Plymouth Harbor. Flights, caravels, and carracks brought Europeans to the Americas. Europeans brought horses, cattle, and hogs to the Americas and took back maize, turkeys, tomatoes, potatoes, tobacco, beans, and squash to Europe. Many explorers and early settlers died after being exposed to new diseases in the Americas. However, the effects of new Eurasian diseases carried by the colonists, especially smallpox and measles, were much worse for the Native Americans, as they had no immunity to them. They suffered epidemics and died in very large numbers, usually before large-scale European settlement began. Their societies were disrupted by the scale of deaths. Spanish contact. Spanish explorers were the first Europeans, after the Norse, to reach the present-day United States, after the voyages of Christopher Columbus, beginning in 1492, established possessions in the Caribbean, including the modern-day U.S. territories of Puerto Rico and parts of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Juan Ponce de Leon landed in Florida in 1513. Spanish expeditions quickly reached the Appalachian Mountains, the Mississippi River, the Grand Canyon, and the Great Plains. In 1539, Hernando de Soto extensively explored the southeast, and a year later Francisco Coronado explored from Arizona to central Kansas in search of gold. Escaped horses from Coronado's party spread over the Great Plains, and the Plains Indians mastered horsemanship within a few generations. Small Spanish settlements eventually grew to become important cities, such as San Antonio, Albuquerque, Tucson, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Dutch Mid-Atlantic. The Dutch East India Company sent explorer Henry Hudson to search for a northwest passage to Asia in 1609. New Netherland was established in 1621 by the company to capitalize on the North American fur trade. Growth was slow at first due to mismanagement by the Dutch and Native American conflicts. After the Dutch purchased the island of Manhattan from the Native Americans, the land was named New Amsterdam and became the capital of New Netherland. The town rapidly expanded, and in the mid-1600s, it became an important trading center. Despite being Calvinists and building the Reformed Church in America, the Dutch were tolerant of other religions and cultures and traded with the Iroquois to the north. The colony served as a barrier to British expansion from New England, and as a result a series of wars were fought. The colony was taken over by Britain as New York in 1664, and its capital was renamed New York City. British colonies. The English, drawn in by Francis Drake's raids on Spanish treasure ships leaving the New World, settled the strip of land along the east coast in the 1600s. The early British colonies were established by private groups seeking profit, and were marked by starvation, disease, and Native American attacks. Many immigrants were people seeking religious freedom or escaping political oppression, peasants displaced by the Industrial Revolution, or those simply seeking adventure and opportunity. Between the late 1610s and the Revolution, the British shipped an estimated 50,000 to 120,000 convicts to their American colonies. In some areas, Native Americans taught colonists how to grow local crops. In others, they attacked the settlers. Virgin forests provided an ample supply of building material and firewood. Natural inlets and harbors lined the coast, providing easy ports for essential trade with Europe. Settlements remained close to the coast due to this, as well as Native American resistance and the Appalachian Mountains in the interior. Swedish settlement. In the early years of the Swedish Empire, Swedish, Dutch, and German stockholders formed the New Sweden Company to trade furs and tobacco in North America. The company's first expedition was led by Peter Minuit, who had been governor of New Netherland from 1626 to 1631, and landed in Delaware Bay in March 1638. The settlers founded Fort Christina at the site of modern-day Wilmington, Delaware, and made treaties with indigenous peoples for land ownership on both sides of the Delaware River. Over the following 17 years, 12 more expeditions brought settlers from the Swedish Empire to New Sweden. The colony established 19 permanent settlements along with many farms, extending into modern-day Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. It was incorporated into New Netherland in 1655 after a Dutch invasion from the neighboring New Netherland colony during the Second Northern War. French and Spanish. Giovanni da Verrazzano landed in North Carolina in 1524 and was the first European to sail into New York Harbor and Narragansett Bay in the 1540s. French Huguenots settled at Fort Carolyn near present-day Jacksonville, Florida, in 1565. Spanish forces led by Pedro Menendez destroyed the settlement and established the first Spanish settlement in what would become the United States, St. Augustine. Most French lived in Quebec and Acadia, modern Canada, but far-reaching trade relationships with Native Americans spread their influence. French colonists in small villages along the Mississippi and Illinois rivers lived in farming communities that served as a grain source for Gulf Coast settlements. The French established plantations in Louisiana, along with settling New Orleans, Mobile, and Biloxi. In the 1660s, the middle colonies of New York, New Jersey, and Delaware were established in the former Dutch New Netherland, and were characterized by a large degree of ethnic and religious diversity. At the same time, the Iroquois of New York, strengthened by years of fur trading with Europeans, formed the powerful Iroquois Confederacy. The last colony in this region was Pennsylvania, established in 1681 by William Penn as a home for religious dissenters, including Quakers, Methodists, and the Amish. 33. The capital of the colony, Philadelphia, became a dominant commercial center in a few short years. While Quakers populated the city, German immigrants began to flood into the Pennsylvanian hills and forests, while the Scots-Irish pushed into the far western frontier. Southern colonies. The Old Plantation. A portrait depicting a plantation in South Carolina in approximately 1790 with Gullah slaves playing traditional West Africa instruments resisting forced assimilation from the plantation culture. The overwhelmingly rural southern colonies contrasted sharply with the New England and Middle colonies. After Virginia, the second British colony south of New England was Maryland, established as a Catholic haven in 1632. The economy of these two colonies was built entirely on yeoman farmers and planters. The planters established themselves in the Tidewater region of Virginia, establishing massive plantations with slave labor. In 1670, the province of Carolina was established, and Charleston became the region's great trading port. While Virginia's economy was also based on tobacco, Carolina was more diversified, exporting rice, indigo, and lumber as well. In 1712, it was divided in two, creating North and South Carolina. The Georgia colony was established by James Oglethorpe in 1732 as a border to Spanish Florida and a reform colony for former prisoners and the poor. 33. Religion. Religiosity expanded greatly after the First Great Awakening, a religious revival in the 1740s, led by preachers such as Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield, American evangelicals, affected by the awakening, added a new emphasis on divine outpourings of the Holy Spirit and conversions that implanted new believers with an intense love for God. Revivals encapsulated those hallmarks and carried the newly created evangelicalism into the early republic, setting the stage for the Second Great Awakening in the late 1790s. 34 In the early stages, evangelicals in the South, such as Methodists and Baptists, preached for religious freedom and abolition of slavery. Government. Each of the American colonies had a slightly different governmental structure. Typically, a colony was ruled by a governor, appointed from London, who controlled the executive administration and relied upon a locally elected legislature to vote on taxes and make laws. By the 18th century, the American colonies were growing very rapidly as a result of low death rates, along with ample supplies of land and food. The colonies were richer than most parts of Britain and attracted a steady flow of immigrants, especially teenagers who arrived as indentured servants. Servitude and slavery. Map of the British, French and Spanish settlements in North America in 1750. Before the French and Indian War, over half of all European immigrants to colonial America arrived as indentured servants, 36 typically. People would sign a contract agreeing to a set term of labor, usually 4 to 7 years, and in return would receive transport to America and a piece of land at the end of their servitude. In some cases, ship's captains received rewards for the delivery of poor migrants, and so extravagant promises and kidnapping were common. The first African slaves arrived in 1619, 37, initially regarded as indentured servants who could buy their freedom. The institution of slavery began to harden, and the involuntary servitude became lifelong. 37. As the demand for labor on tobacco and rice plantations grew, in the 1660s, citation needed. Slavery became identified with brown skin color, and the children of slave women were born slaves, known as partus sequitur ventrum. 37. By the 1770s, African slaves comprised a fifth of the American population. The question of independence from Britain did not arise as long as the colonies needed British military support against the French and Spanish powers. Those threats were gone by 1765. However, London continued to regard the American colonies as existing for the benefit of the mother country in a policy known as mercantilism. 35. Colonial America was defined by a severe labor shortage that used forms of unfree labor, such as slavery and indentured servitude. The British colonies were also marked by a policy of avoiding strict enforcement of parliamentary laws, known as salutary neglect. This permitted the development of an American spirit distinct from that of its European founders. 38.